Okay, time now for some reaction to the COVID payment backflip. A man who was calling for it from the Retail Doctor Group, CEO Brian Walker. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Brian, why did the PM make the right call here?
Good evening, Erin. You know, the retail sector in this country is a $375 billion sector. It employs over 1.2 million people. And somewhere between 60 to 65% of those people are part-time and casual employees. And accordingly, we also live right now in a very difficult situation around staff shortages, skill shortages in retail, as in many other sectors. We see a rising costs of living, costs of unemployment, inflation, and so forth. And of course, we also see the rise of difficulties around supply channels and what have you. So all this leads us to believe that a modified safety net, if you like, or as Mr. Albanese says, protecting the vulnerable for people who have no sick leave is a reasonable course of action. So we support it on that basis.
Brian, you talk about staff absences and labour shortages. This payment, yes, absolutely enables people to stay home who otherwise wouldn't get sick leave. It gives them something to live on. But how does it address that issue of staff absences and labour shortages?
Well, sort of as I talk further into this, Erin, we'll talk about the need to ensure that, retail, like all sectors, needs to have a productive workforce. It needs to have people able to work and not exposed to situations where they're unable to be compensated in some way, shape or form or assisted. And therefore, in many cases, become, in some cases, vectors of the virus, push themselves to work in situations they wouldn't have otherwise, and exasperate this major, significant problem that we all face. So for that, we certainly think, look, as we learn to live with COVID, as we learn to live in a more balanced environment with COVID, we're looking at this and supporting a balanced or modified view of this. So in essence, this is I think a budget estimate of about a $390 million payment. It's a significant amount of money. And if I think by sort of an extension, the JobKeeper period, which was a $101 billion payment, as I understood it, supported about 3.5 million workers. So the kind of central narrative around that is to support the vulnerable, to contain the virus where we can, and to keep our employees as productive as they can be.
Clearly, your sector will benefit from this, hospitality as well. You advocate for them. But what do you say to those Australians who are more worried about our $1 trillion debt?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even politicians, both sides, have certainly raised this topic. I mean, at the end of the day, the balance of payments is a significant issue, and governments have got all sort of fiscal measures that will address this. But I go back to the earlier point. It's estimated to be a $390 million payment. You've made the comment today or tonight, Erin, that there are budgetary measures that can be taken place to offset. Perhaps there's spending that could be offset in certain areas. I think at the end of the day, it's a very difficult situation, but I come back to the needs of the vulnerable people, and I come back to the fact that we have such a significant amount of people employed part-time and casual in this sector that need this support.
We're looking at COVID being far from over. We're going to keep experiencing new variants and spikes. When does it move from being an anomaly, so the government has to step in, to something that your industry just has to somehow deal with?
I think, well, I don't have a crystal ball, to be very candid. I mean, this is the issue for epidemiologists and economists to look through. But from our sector perspective, that the structural elements don't really change whilst we have a situation where such a large part-time and casual workforce relies on the support. I know our associations look very closely at this. It's a crystal ball question. I think that no doubt that over time, if we look at JobKeeper payments, we look at this payment, there does seem to be a dilution of the level of payments and a more structural sort of addressing of these issues. But, how significant this next wave of COVID, which I believe is spiking in August, from what I can see. We may well find that come into that Christmas window, that hopefully that October, November, December period of the year, where retail is typically at its highest spend, where we typically have our highest need for workforce, that will reach some form of equilibrium then.
Okay, Brian, we thank you very, very much for your time. And as I said earlier, I think it's the right move. I just don't know for how much longer it can be done. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for being on the show, Erin.